welcome. Today, the Living with Wildlife Illinois team is having a Q&A session about urban waterfowl in Illinois. I'm Laura Kamen.
And I'm Kathy Andrews Wright. Today we're joined by Ben Williams with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources and Craig Pullins from the Illinois Wildlife Services. Ben, let's start off with you. Can you give us a short description of what your role is with the Department of Natural Resources?
Sure. So my official title with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, or shortened IDNR, I am the Urban Waterfowl Project Manager. And so I'm one of our waterfowl biologists throughout the state. But my specific duties focus a lot on our urban issues, I guess. Urban geese, urban ducks. I also just, in general, work with our migratory birds throughout the state. So I do get to move throughout the state and travel and see a lot of new people, a lot of new places. But I would say my focus is on waterfowl issues, urban waterfowl issues throughout the state. I do get to help with some of the waterfowl management planning. So setting our hunting seasons and regulations, some of the habitat projects we have going on, I get to be involved with that. And then I represent Illinois on the Mississippi Flyway Council that makes decisions throughout the Mississippi Flyway up north into Canada and down south to the Gulf. I represent Illinois as our non-game bird technical section. So all of the nice songbirds and all of the raptors and all of those birds, I get to advocate for them on Illinois' behalf.
Thanks, Ben. Craig will pitch the same to you, but I'm guessing that our audience, while we're probably pretty familiar with the work that the IDNR does, they may not be quite as familiar with the work that Wildlife Services is doing. So maybe if you give an overview of the work that your agency is doing as well.
Certainly, yeah. So Wildlife Services is a division of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So we're a federal program. And our mission, USDA Wildlife Services mission, is to provide federal leadership and expertise in resolving human-wildlife conflicts where people and wildlife do coexist. So Wildlife Services conducts program deliveries and research and other wildlife management around the country in collaboration with our research division, the National Wildlife Research Center. So our program biologists, they apply an integrated wildlife damage management approach to providing technical assistance and direct control operations around the country. And so we deliver a wide variety of projects or direct control options and technical assistance and research to people all over the country. Me specifically here, I'm a district supervisor of our Chicago district, so I also deal a lot with urban wildlife conflicts. And so we do a wide range of projects up here where we're primarily helping people resolve conflicts or hazards, specifically like on airports, O'Hare and Midway, for instance. Working at power generation facilities. We work with some electrical transmission and substations. We work for the local park districts and some of the forest preserve districts on various types of human-wildlife conflicts.
Okay, thank you, Craig, for that. I think, Craig, we'll start off with the first question that we received with you. Have you chime in on this one. Has to deal with Canada geese and the large numbers of them that can congregate around subdivisions, make messes in the yards, on golf courses and everything. The question is, what can we do to get rid of some of those problem geese?
Well, first and foremost, yeah, we get that question quite often. I'm sure Ben does as well. But what we have to remember is that Canada geese are a natural resource, and a lot of people do enjoy having them in and around their property and in the area and parks around them. So we all have to remember that. Secondly, though, there needs to be a balance. Geese, when they become overpopulated or overabundant, can cause a lot of conflicts and a lot of damage to property and the enjoyment of that property, whether it's too much feces or aggressive geese during the nesting season. So yeah, we do need to strike a balance with them. So there are some options, and a lot of things that people can do and try to kind of help maintain that balance and also help limit some of the conflicts and damage they may have on their property. So I'm going to go through several things that people can use and try. Some things will work. There's no silver bullet that's going to one size fits all sort of approach. So we recommend an integrated approach of trying lots of different things. You know, because a lot of times it may take several different approaches to finally help you with your situation. But harassment is one that we recommend, whether it's through the use of, I mean, just simple as like clapping your hands, banging pots and pans. You can use lasers, pyrotechnics. They make a lot of agriculture folks can have used pyrotechnics to kind of help scare birds off of their property or off of their area using lasers. Dogs are another one. There's private companies that you can hire that do harassment for you. Just remember that the dog is an extension of your hand, so you cannot harm the geese. They are federally protected and state protected. So, you know, you can't harm them through any of these actions, but, you know, some simple harassment can go a long way sometimes. I always recommend to people, though, to make sure that it's persistent and consistent. So you can't go out there one time, scare them off, and think that that's going to solve the problem. You know, you have to keep doing it over and over until they eventually learn that this isn't a place that they want to hang out in. In addition to harassment, there are some exclusion techniques that are available. Fencing is a pretty popular one that we see a lot, especially around water bodies. You know, you can fence off the shoreline with just like different strands. You can use chicken wire, woven wire fence, strands of wire that go across. And what that does is essentially provides a barrier that the geese will not be able to cross from the water into your property. Now, that doesn't prevent them from flying, obviously. So there are other things, like if you have a small pond that you want to keep them out of, you can install an overhead grid system, which is a series of lines, crossing lines over some sort of water body that would prevent the birds from being able to come in and land. Again, there's pros and cons to everything. You know, that's going to limit some of your access. If this pond is good for fishing, you're not really going to want an overhead grid system over there, because you're going to end up, you know, preventing casting and things like that. So it's going to limit some of your fishing opportunities and things like that. And, you know, if you have swimming on your shoreline, you know, having a barrier or a fence up there isn't ideal for that. So you kind of have to gauge the situation on what you have, and then go from there about whether that would work. Another one would be habitat modification, whether that's eliminating feeding. You know, not only is feeding not necessarily healthy for wild animals, but it can also get them to begin to congregate and start causing more problems and more feces and that sort of thing. So you definitely want to eliminate any sort of artificial feeding. If you're designing a pond or you're on a creek, I mean, you can try to make the banks as steep as possible. They don't really like to walk up steep banks. You can put riprap or large rocks on the bank to try to discourage them from walking up onto your shoreline or out of the creek if you're on a creek. We see this a lot around the city as well, of people having bubblers or fountains in their ponds. You can turn those off in the winter and allow the water to freeze. The birds aren't going to want to hang around if the water is completely frozen. So letting your pond freeze will help if it gets cold enough to freeze it all the way across. But if you leave that water open all winter long, the birds are going to love it, and they're going to probably be there. Going back to the vegetation side of things, you can plant some native vegetation along your shoreline and allow it to grow taller. That will discourage the geese from wanting to walk through that to get from the water onto your property. So allowing the grass or planting shrubs or something along your shoreline can help discourage them from accessing your property. And that provides a good sort of natural exclusionary barrier there. So those are some of the habitat modification options that are available. There are a couple of chemical repellents that are available for use. Again, you have to gauge whether this is what you want to do on your property or for your constituency. So you definitely want to look into these. One of the repellents available is the active ingredient is called anthraquinone, and it's a non-lethal repellent. It's currently is registered for the use of geese. And the way that that works is you spray it on the grass, and then when the geese go to eat the grass, I think they describe it as gives them like sort of like indigestion or an intestinal uncomfortable or something like that. I forget what some of the websites say and what they call it, but essentially it gives them a little stomach ache. And then it also, a unique factor about this one is it changes the UV structure of the grass, which is the way that geese see the grass. And so they begin over time to associate the stomach ache with this funny looking grass. And then they learn to just not eat it any longer. So, so that's one repellent that is available. Another one is called methylanthranilate. Pretty similar to anthraquinone, and also makes the grass a lot less palatable, and they just don't like it. So those are a couple options folks can look into to see if that would work for them. Another option is legal hunting. Again, that's really going to be determined on the amount of space that you have, and I would certainly recommend that you reach out to the IDNR Ben or your local district wildlife biologist to certainly take a look before you invest too much time and effort into a hunting program. Obviously there's certain laws and regulations on the amount of space that you need from certain buildings and dwellings and things like that before you'd be allowed to even have a hunting program. But if it fits the option, or if it is an option that fits for you, that could be a way to kind of locally help reduce the local population that are causing problems, especially in that early goose season that is intended to target some of the non-migratory birds. Another option that is available, a lot of the folks up in this area do use a lot, is the egg and nest destruction program, which does require a permit. So you would need to reach out to Ben or the DNR to obtain a permit to do this. And what this is a long-term strategy of population reduction because you're limiting reproduction on a given year. There's several options that you can use to prevent eggs from hatching. One of them that's commonly used is just coating the eggs with food grade corn oil, and then it essentially stops the development of the eggs. But what it does is it sort of tricks the adults into thinking they still have a viable nest, because if you just go and pick up the nest too early, they'll just go somewhere else and make another nest and lay more eggs. So this is a way of kind of tricking them into not laying making another nest and laying more eggs. But again, make sure you contact the DNR. It does require a permit to do this. You want to make sure you follow all those regulations. And then one of the last options that is available, if all of these things have not worked and you've tried all these different things, the DNR does sanction what's called a charity harvest, and that it is a process run through the DNR. So Ben would be able to help you with this, but you need to document the problem that you have. You need to show all of the steps that you've taken over the years to sort of try these non-lethal other habitat or other options that are available to try to coexist and with geese. And then there's an application that would need to be completed and submitted to the DNR. They then look over the application and determine whether they're going to issue a permit for a charity harvest. If it is permitted, then the way this program works is there's a period of time when the local birds do molt, which means they shed their flight feathers and they're no longer able to fly. So they can be captured during that period. So they are captured, and it's done by our agency to be able to do the captures for a fee. We want people to know that it's not a free service. So it kind of depend on the how big the problem is, and how long it would take, kind of the price of it would be. So that's something we would figure out if you get to that point. And then all the birds that are captured are humanely euthanized, and then the meat is donated to a charitable organization. The idea, and Ben could probably speak on this a little bit more as well, but the idea of this program is not a every year type of thing. It's to help property owners or associations or groups to sort of reset the clock, with the expectation that all of the other non-lethal techniques and tools would still be used moving forward. So that way, hopefully it would be several years before that charity harvest option would be needed again. So all the other things that they've been doing leading up to that would need to continue on after a charity harvest. So that's sort of the laundry list of ideas that I could provide. I don't know, Ben, if you have anything else you'd want to add into my response there.
I think that was pretty comprehensive. The only thing I'll add to your comment about the charity harvest, Craig, is that you're right. You know, we do expect people have tried a lot of those other options first. And generally, the first time I hear from somebody is not when they're interested in a charity harvest. It takes a lot of planning and a lot of coordination and a lot of documentation. And so if that's something that your homeowners association or your agency or whoever is interested in, we need to start having those discussions. And it's usually a multiple month, if not multiple year kind of plan or project, as we kind of plan that out and make sure that all other avenues have been tried and that everything is done to our requirements. The only other thing I'll add that I sometimes get questions about is the possibility of relocation or capturing geese and bringing them somewhere else. And at this point, the DNR does not really consider that as a viable solution to some of these goose problems. What we find is that adult birds will fly back to the area that we captured them from, and we'll just begin re-nesting there the following year. And so it's not super effective. Throughout the state, most of the habitat that is good for geese is already occupied by geese. So there's not a ton of open available habitat that we could take birds to. And we'd probably just be moving the problem elsewhere. Somebody else would now have nuisance problems. And so for kind of those reasons, we just don't authorize that anymore. They did in the past, and it's just not a management solution we're comfortable with anymore. And so I get that question a lot. Can we just capture them and move them somewhere else? And unfortunately, the answer is no at this point. But I think Craig did a good job at summing up all of the management options available. And so, yeah, like he said, if you have questions, feel free to give me or him or somebody from the DNR or USDA a call, and we can kind of walk you through some of those and get into specifics too. I've gone out to multiple golf courses and homeowners associations and had those discussions with people on how best they can implement some of those.
All right, well, we're gonna switch gears just a little bit from management of geese that you don't want potentially over to ducks that maybe you do want. So the next question we received says, I have a mallard duck who made a nest in my yard. She started the incubation process and sat on her nest for 10 days without leaving. Then I noticed that she was not on her nest for most of the day, but she covered her eggs with mulch, so I don't think she left out of fear. But she has not been back yet, and it has been 3 days. I have looked online for answers, but I've gotten a variety of opinions. So how long should I wait to be sure she has abandoned her nest? Should I try to rescue the eggs? I don't know what to do. We made sure she was safe, so I don't know why she would have left her nest. Ben, do you want to tackle this one first?
First off, I'll just say, you know, it's probably nothing you did. Whoever the questioner was, you know, for mallards to abandon a nest is not uncommon. It's a defense mechanism that hens will do. Ultimately, the adult hen is more valuable than the potential offspring. She can go and re-nest and have a new clutch somewhere else, but juvenile survival is lower. So she's more important, I guess, to the long-term survival of her species than those eggs. So that's why she may have abandoned the nest. And like I said, mallards do this relatively often. So it's not really a huge reason for concern. Mallards are very common in Illinois. And like I said, they have a propensity to re-nest. So most likely, if she abandoned the nest, it could be for a number of reasons, but she might be starting a new nest somewhere else. That said, it's possible that she was taken by a predator or injured somewhere else. It might not even be on your property. During the nesting period while they're incubating, the hen will leave once or twice a day, usually to get some water, get some food. And so it's possible that she was injured or killed somewhere else. And unfortunately, that's just nature being nature. It's not easy always to be a duck. So those things happen. If she did abandon, though, back to that, at this point, like I said, you know, mallards they'll leave the nest for once or twice a day. But if it's been 3 days, that's too long for her to have been gone from the nest during incubation. And so it's most likely been abandoned. And in that case, I would say that rescuing the eggs is not really advisable. It is illegal to possess wild migratory birds. There are some breeders' permits involved for people that are interested in breeding birds, I guess, but this wouldn't fall into that classification. So, you know, it's not legal to hatch the ducklings yourself, put them in an incubator. Wildlife rehabilitation facilities would be the next option, I guess. The DNR does not do any sort of rescue or rehabilitation of wildlife. So we suggest that people that have wildlife that need rehabilitation contact the wildlife rehabilitation facilities. If you go to our website, wildlifeillinois.org, there's an entire tab for information on wildlife rehab facilities. And so you can find them in your area. We do recommend that you call ahead of time, especially in the spring. They get full up very quickly. And so there might not be room at the closest one to you. So call around, figure out where, you know, someone might accept those that injured or abandoned wildlife. Ultimately, though, I would say that your best bet, if a wildlife rehabilitation facility isn't available, you know, after 3 days, that nest might be no longer viable, and at that point, you can dispose of a failed nest attempt. So I would recommend either burying the nest and the eggs, or putting it all into a garbage bag and disposing of it. If you want, you can give me a call at my contact information that'll be listed, and we can talk about it. You know, like I said, you don't necessarily need a permit for a failed nest, but it's always good for me and the DNR to know about failed nest attempts, so we can document that and just keep track of everything. So, you know, at some point, if you just leave it, the eggs will probably spoil and maybe attract other predators, or just have a funky smell to it. So you probably want to dispose of it at some point. So yeah, Craig, do you have anything to add to that? Any other thoughts for potentially abandoned?
I think you covered most of it, and I'll reiterate that you know, I think it's important to know is not anything that you likely did as the landowner, the homeowner. You know, mallards are pretty abundant around most of Illinois, and so, you know, I wouldn't. I just would want to make sure that you don't feel bad about it. As Ben said, she likely made a new nest somewhere else, and there could be, you know, several reasons on why she decided to abandon that. But wildlife are pretty smart, and so, you know, it's exciting that you have a nest on your property, and hopefully she'll come back and feel more comfortable, or for whatever reason next year. And there's nothing that they did wrong.
Well, thank you. Our next question is really pertinent right now, and it comes from someone who says that she and her daughter really love to go to the park and feed the ducks and geese. We see that all the time. But they recently saw a Facebook post about a condition called angel wing and learned that feeding bread to ducks and geese is really not a great idea. Their question is, what is there that is healthy that they can continue their practice of a day at the park and feeding ducks and geese?
Well, I'll jump in and take a stab at this. Ultimately, I guess the way I feel about this is that ducks and waterfowl and just wildlife in general, they're very good at finding the food that they need, and that's right for their diet. Angel wing is caused by malnutrition, essentially, not getting the right food that they need. And like I said, ducks and geese are very good at finding the food they need. So I usually don't recommend feeding wildlife of any kind just because it can cause other problems. You know, it can cause a dependency on humans for their food, which can become a lack of fear of humans and potentially become aggressive towards humans. You know, wildlife depend on their fear of humans for some aspect of safety. Again, you know, the humans don't always give them the right food, you know, so like we're talking about with angel wing, there can be a deficiency of nutrients. And then there's also the potential for non-target species to be impacted. For example, if you put out a bunch of food for geese or something and it doesn't all get cleaned up, other species like deer might come in and start eating on that food, and you know, they have their own problems. We're familiar with some deer diseases out there that are caused by close quarters, flocking of geese to a specific area. And so generally, I just don't recommend feeding wildlife. That said, if you still want to feed geese, still want to feed ducks, I would recommend some sort of commercial poultry feed or barley or some other grain, not a processed food like bread would be.
And I would just add into that a little bit as well is that we also recommend, as I talked about earlier in my response to the Canada Goose question, is we don't recommend feeding of wildlife. Again, we understand, and I have young kids too, so I know that it's kind of fun to take and then get them in close encounter with wildlife. But as Ben mentioned, it can cause problems in the future. In addition to what Ben already mentioned, also you're congregating those species, and then you start artificially congregating them into the point where they're causing problems for you and somebody else, whether it's through fecal matter or aggression or property damage through trampling of your grass or whatnot. So feeding is also going to contribute to congregation, which could then lead to other problems. So that's another reason why I would suggest that we try to avoid feeding whenever possible, and enjoy them in sort of their natural habitat.
Very good, thanks. So we're gonna switch back to another question about duck nests again. And this is a question that comes in every year. She says, there's a duck nest in our backyard, but we aren't anywhere near water. What should we do when the ducklings hatch?
I'll take first stab at this one. So again, similar to what I said earlier, congratulations, you have some nice habitat on your property. That's first and foremost for any sort of wildlife to create a nest or nesting area on your property it shows that you're doing something well that's encouraging them to come to your property. But when they do hatch, just be aware that you may, if you have a fenced in backyard or there's a gate or something, you might want to be cognizant of that, and you may have to open a gate to make sure that they can get out through the gate or through the fence. So you want to be able to help them be able to find their way out if it is fenced in. But similar to the question earlier, the pair or the hen had selected that site or that property for some sort of reason. And so, as I mentioned, wildlife are pretty smart, and a lot of times they have a reason for selecting the sites that they do. So, you kind of have to let nature take its course a little bit too. And there may be water nearby that you might not be aware of. It might be a small pond or a little something that you may not be aware of. So my advice would be to just see where things go and let them decide what they want to do. Because in addition, it may not, let's just say it may not be a successful nest this year. They learned that, hey, if I go and nest in this spot, I didn't have a successful nest there, so she will select a different site the following year. So there's a lot that may go into their site selection, but the fact that you have one on your property, enjoy it, and then just hopefully things can go well, and they'll find water. They'll take care of themselves, and they've done well enough that they're a reason that they're at the population sizes that they are, is because they know how to survive.
Very good. Ben, anything to add to that?
Sure, I'll just weigh in quickly. I think Craig's exactly right. You know, they know what they're doing. I've had people, kind of tying into the last question, I've had people say, well, should we provide anything for the hen? And again, she doesn't need any food. She will go and find her own food. She'll be perfectly fine. Most likely after those ducklings hatch, she'll probably have them out of there within a couple hours. The only thing I've seen people do that I think is probably okay is having some sort of water dish out there, you know, in case she needs some water right at, you know, as those ducklings are hatching. Or I've actually seen people take plastic sleds from the wintertime and just kind of fill those up with some water so that those ducklings are especially if it's hot, they can cool off a little bit. But otherwise, yeah, they don't need anything from you. Just enjoy. Hopefully they hatch when you're able to observe them from a little bit of a distance, and she'll march them out of there as soon as they're all able to. So.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions that we received from our readers. So we'll leave this with just some general statements. Craig, is there anything else, any other messages you would like to send off to our readers before we sign off?
Yeah, I would just end by just encouraging people to get out and enjoy nature, especially in today's day and age, the most recent months where, you know, we've had some limited options for activities to do. One of the things that I've really tried to encourage in taking my kids is to get out and to see nature. Pick up some of those things maybe you used to do as a kid. If you haven't gone fishing in a while, go do some fishing or do some hiking. Get out, especially in Chicago area. There is a lot of opportunity that people may not be aware of green spaces and forest preserves where you can get out and enjoy wildlife. And you know, I think getting back to nature is important and healthy for all of us. So, you know, in terms of some of the conflicts that can come up with wildlife, you know, it does happen, but for the most part, you know, we do coexist pretty well. And get out and enjoy them as much as you can, because it's a wild world out there. So get out and enjoy it.
Okay, thank you. Those are good points. Ben, you have any other final words to say?
I agree with Craig, and that everybody should try to get out and enjoy nature a little bit. I would also just remind everyone that, you know, even if you're having problems with what you would consider a common bird that you see everywhere, all migratory birds are protected at a federal level through the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and at a state level through our Illinois Wildlife Code. And so if you're having problems, reach out to Craig or myself or someone in USDA or IDNR to help you out with that. There are a lot of laws and things like that we can help you navigate to deal with your problem. But like I said, even if it's something common that you see every day, we appreciate if you could reach out to us. And we like hearing those stories and getting out and seeing new things. And we learn and see new things every day. So I appreciate hearing all of that and hearing from the people out there. So that's all I have. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with everyone today.
Yes, thanks, Ben, and thanks, Craig, for joining us today. That wraps it up for our Q&A on urban waterfowl in Illinois. We're going to be hosting another Q&A next month on nuisance wildlife. So if you have questions about those, please keep sending those in. And then until next time.